everybody, it seems like now, is at least on some level dealing with anxiety, dealing with some sort of depression. Look at all the news going on right now. There's so much right now. It's social media, everything's coming at you. You're going to have a little level of anxiety. And that's actually probably somewhat normal if you're listening to the news, doing this and that, and it's all coming at you. And then you start to have these symptoms, not asking for the words of it, but what made you kind of come to that connection of the mold and move past? You did those extra pieces to try and say it's not anxiety, but your own conventional doctors were like, there's nothing wrong.
Right.
Did that take some real confidence in your ability to say, this is not that anxiety, this is something else?
Well, I think at the time I thought that. I think in retrospect, it's not that it was the anxiety or wasn't. It was, but that was still a piece of it. Like, because as you spend longer in a chronic illness state, you lose hope and you think you're dying and stuff like that. So that stuff definitely played into it. And that's the content that I put out is kind of all about that piece of it, right? I can't sit here and recommend treatments that people can go do, like are available at your center. What it can do is try to help people with their mental approach to things. And I think that our current state of the world is so disempowering in that aspect. And it's like, it's the one thing that you can affect all the time on your own. You don't need anybody else to do it. And the message to people is the exact opposite. It is, we always say that, like, oh man, someone commits suicide, right? Dies by suicide. And it's always like, oh, I wish we'd known, we could have gotten them help or something. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. But what would have been better is if that person had actually had the tools in place to be able to deal with it themselves, right? Like, it's just like physical training. I do a lot of likening to physical training. It's like working out and being in shape prepares you for when life throws a physical challenge at you and you're able to deal with it, right? And it might be a life-saving scenario, right? Like, I don't know, a burning building that you have to like pick somebody up and run out of. If you can't do that physically, that's potentially the end of your life, right? But we don't think of mental things that way at all. And if you can train yourself, then when the darkness comes in, you can handle it better, right? Like you can analyze it for what it is, and you can have all these tools, the same exact idea, be able to deal with that. So anyway, getting back to kind of the mold thing, and it's the mold is so interesting because it's, again, one of these things I had no idea that was a thing. Mm-hmm. If someone had, even when it happened, I still didn't know what had happened. I was like, what? But the only thing I could figure out was like, okay, I felt fine this day, and the next day I didn't. So what happened in between those 2 days? And it was like, I did this thing, right? Or I spent a lot of time doing this thing, which was not something I'd ever done before. So I was like, it's got to be something that. And I did what a lot of people do. Again, once the doctors give you I don't know, and start Googling stuff, right? And I just came across all this mold stuff. And I was like, I think I have mold toxicity, right? And just like Shoemaker protocol and all of that kind of stuff. I think, again, in retrospect, that was a piece of it. That was a trigger. And it's a thing that needs to be dealt with in some form or fashion. But it wasn't everything, because I did all that Shoemaker stuff. And then I was still like, I still don't feel better. Like, what, I'm so hopeful for taking a bunch of cholestyramine for 6 months. And that was like, once I got that, and I had to do a lot of convincing, I had to like go track it down, convince my doctor to prescribe this stuff, even though I didn't have like cholesterol problems. Mm-hmm. Right. And then it was like finally I got it. I got the solution here. And then after like a year of chugging this cholestyramine crap every day, it was like, I'm not better. I don't like what's going on here. So, and it's not to say it didn't work either, right? Like it probably did its job. The problem was, again, that was just a was just one piece. It's the trigger. It's the final piece. I liken, there's people that like have this like barrel analogy of a human being where it's like, you can fill it up so much, and then at some point it's going to overflow, right? And that's sort of like all the toxicity and whatever. And that can be emotional, that can be mental. I use an analogy of the reason I don't necessarily like that analogy is because you can stop the overflow and then you're good. But like that doesn't really apply to the way chronic illness works. The way chronic illness works in my mind is more like a Jenga puzzle, right? Those like towers of blocks, that game. And what happens is over time, you get various insults to your body or your psyche or whatever. And those are pieces that are coming out. And that can be mold, that can be anxiety problems, that can be emotional trauma as a child, that can be Lyme disease. And then at some point, the last piece gets pulled out and the system crashes, right? The thing falls over. And typically the way you would think of this in medicine would be, okay, it was mold, right? We put that block back up. And he's like, why aren't we fixed? It's like, because all the other pieces are still on the floor. You have to build everything back up. You literally have to put the entire structure back together piece by piece. And it's not a one solution, right? And until you do that, it's literally like piece by piece, you got to do this, you got to do this. You just got to keep chipping away at it. And it's just so challenging and so tricky. But it can be done. And I think that's the message that really needs to go out to people, right? Like, because for the longest time I was like, I got to that point where I was like, I'm just going to give up. Like, I don't even know if I can ever get out of this.
Yeah, a lot of people get to that point, unfortunately, especially when they are kind of passed around. You get that shrug, like, we don't know, from your conventional doctors and specialists and everyone in that field. And it's interesting because you bring up that barrel, model basically of toxicity of all these things. And then you bring up these two, the Jenga blocks as well, which both are right. But people don't realize, whichever one you look at and want to make the analogies for, it's that as long as you have anything in the barrel, as long as the pieces in the Jenga are there, your body is compensating. Your body's already there, right? An empty barrel, your body is perfect and it's doing. And even in the barrel methods, like, when my fathers and others talk about, you have a spigot too. That's your ability to detoxify certain things. So if you get a few drops in, the spigot's big enough to get them out at that pace, you're good. Your body is not compensating for anything. But as it fills up and you can't get enough and the drops keep coming in quicker, and like you said, these aren't separate barrels of like, one's physical, and you're just eating something with glyphosate, and one's stress and mental stuff, so it's different. No, they all go in the same barrel.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's where people also kind of forget, like, oh, I eat so clean. Yeah, but you're ridden with stress. You're constantly like in toxic relationships that are taking so much out of you. So it's, yes, this one is not adding as many drops, but you got another one going in. And as long as the drops are accumulating, then your body is compensating somehow.
Yeah.
And you're right. As you compensate, you become weaker. It's not just your liver, it's all these different, pieces. That's why when you look at chronic disease today, and I'm sure you know of this, it is so multifaceted. It's not just, you have a disease, it's just your immune system that needs to be boosted. No, it's already impacted so many different things, your neurological system, and it's also impacted your psyche, your psychological state.
Yeah.
All of these things need to be addressed and put back together for you to truly be healthy. You can't just get rid of one piece, like you said. All right, mold's gone, you're healthy.